Hey everybody, Chris Bula, Sony's global product trainer for car audio. And in today's workshop, we're going to dive into the inputs and outputs and kind of the capabilities of our Sony Mobile ES multi-channel amplifiers. Sony really created a lot of flexibility when it came to our Mobile ES amplifiers. But one of the core principles that we focused on was the power output. It doesn't really do any good to have a great flexible amplifier for application's sake, but not have the power to back it up. So we want to make sure that we provide you all of the power you would need for any great sounding audio system. You can see on this chart all the way from our XM1ES monoblock amplifier all the way up through our 8-channel 8ES amplifier. We give you a great amount of power and are 2 ohm stable for many applications. On our 1ES, we've got 600 watts by 1 at 4 ohm. This is CTA rated, of course, as all of our power ratings are, and 1000 watts at 2 ohm. Our 4-channel amplifier starts our multi-channel process for power output. So all of the amplifiers from our 4ES up through our 8ES have the same power output per channel. So 100 watts by 4 at 4 ohm, 165 watts by 4 at 2 ohm. Okay, so multiply that by the number of channels that you have. So you'll notice that our 8-channel amplifier up at the top has that same power output by 8 channels. At 2 ohm, we have 165 watts by 4. This is great because this also transitions all the way up the line. So even that 6 and 8 channel has that 165 watts by the number of channels they have at 2 ohm. On top of that, you can bridge each pair of channels down on our multi-channel amplifiers. So those 4 channels can be bridged to 2 channels at 4 ohm impedance and get 330 watts RMS out of it on just our 4ES alone. The 8ES is our monster and 330 watts by 4 at 4 ohm. These are great sounding amplifiers with great amount of power output for really a lot of flexibility for an application in a vehicle. With the amount of flexibility we have on our Sony Mobile ES amplifiers, you're probably kind of scratching your head on how you would control all of that. So in most vehicles, you're probably doing a DSP or some sort, before the amplifiers, and you can control a lot of that. Many of them come with a controller that you can embed in the dash, whatever you want to do with that. But if you're simply just applying some amplifiers to a vehicle, we've got a great solution here for you. With our 1ES and our 5ES, that's our monoblock and our 5-channel that has the subwoofer output as well, we include a bass remote knob. And this bass remote knob is actually pretty flexible itself. Just plugs in. It's an RJ9 cable that you can run from the control knob all the way back to the back of the car. You can actually purchase a splitter online or from your distributor, wherever you decide to source those products. And if you split that cable, you can run it to multiple amplifiers. So we have some technicians that might do an XM5ES amplifier, one for the right side of the car, one for the left side, and then use this one single bass remote knob to control both of those amplifiers. If you're doing that, please be sure that you level match the input sensitivity on both of those amplifiers. The way that bass remote knob works is it goes from 0 to the maximum input sensitivity level you have set on the amplifier it's connected to. So if you have 2 5ESs and one of them is set at maybe 3/4 input sensitivity and the other one is set to half, the scale of that adjustability for each one of those amplifiers will be different. It doesn't have any effect on how you'd use that bass remote knob, but the level of output from each one of those individual amps that's set it differently will be different on the output side. So make sure you're setting that level correctly when you're installing those amplifiers. All right, so both high and low level inputs are available for all of our Mobile ES amplifiers. This is important because integrating these into a factory system often requires nowadays a low level input, whether it's a factory amplified system or just a standard system that's coming off of the factory radio. You might actually have to use the low level input instead of the high level. Back in the day, technicians almost used to flip this switch like a habit based on whether they were putting in an OEM integration system or an aftermarket one. Aftermarket meant you were going low level. OEM meant you were going high level. That was kind of the basis through the 90s, maybe even the early 2000s. Nowadays, the OEM systems have changed quite a bit. So they actually often have low level inputs going either to or out of the OEM amplifier. It's pretty crazy, some of the stuff you'll see. So what we've done is we've given you the low-level input variations capable on our amplifiers. So on the low-level setting, we accommodate a 0.3 volt to an 8 volt RMS. So the peaks will obviously settle. Your peak may be higher in that OEM system, but the RMS level is what we're looking at. So we handle up to 8 volts RMS on that low level and go down to that 0.3 volts setting. And then on the high level input, we can accommodate 3 volts all the way up to 18 volts RMS. So because of that RMS rating on that, you can certainly accommodate most of the factory amplified systems out there on the output side of a factory amplifier. This can help you if that factory amplifier is run from, data from the factory radio to the amp, or if there's some sort of leveling or filtering or some sort of bias that the factory amplifier puts into the audio system that you cannot replicate without adding a DSP or replacing that entire audio system up front. This gives you a lot of flexibility for sure. On the high level input, you will have to source your own RCA pigtails to go in the amplifier. We only have the RCA inputs on the amp, so you'll have to use these pigtails to get those high level wires connected to the amplifier. Flexibility is the name of the game when it comes to our Sony Mobile ES amplifiers. We want to make sure that we give you both the inputs and the outputs that you need to accommodate any type of system. On the input side, we have several modes, and those are pictured on the amplifier, and they actually have a picture that shows exactly what the input and output does on the amplifier. But we decided to make these slides to make this a little bit easier to comprehend. On a 1 through 4, 1 through 6, or 1 through 8 mode, and that, of course, is available on the appropriate amplifiers. 1 through 4 is on our 4ES and 5ES. 1 through 6 is available on our 6ES, and 1 through 8 is available on our 8ES. You have a one-to-one relationship between the input of the amplifier and the speaker output of the amplifier. Very easy to do. One-to-one relationship. This is how many of your installations will be hooked up. Next up, we have a 1-2 mode. This is kind of a stereo input mode, and this might be useful if maybe the customer didn't have the budget for an 8 or 10 or 12 channel DSP, for instance. Maybe they've got a 6-channel DSP, or your favorite brand of DSP only had the 6-channel output, and you really need to expand that to many more channels. We're able to take 2 channels of input and provide that 2-channel output across the array of channels that are on that amplifier. Of course, please note that the channels 5 through 8 are only available on the appropriate amps, right? So the channels 1 through 4 are available on all of them. Channels 5 through 6 are available on the 6-channel amp, of course, and the 8-channel. And then 7 and 8 are only available on the 8ES. The stereo input, channel 1 and channel 2, provides the output to the speaker outputs. And your odd inputs on every application for a Sony Mobile ES amplifier provides output for the odd channels. So channel 1 covers channels 1, 3, 5, and 7 on those applicable amplifiers. Channel 2 provides signal to your even number channel outputs. So channel 2 on the input provides channels 2, 4, 6, and 8 on the appropriate amps. Our 1+3, 2+4 mode gives you kind of a glorified Y adapter cable set inside the amplifier. This is very useful because there might be a point where in a vehicle you have to combine a couple of channels on the input side to get the output side that you need. Toyotas, for instance, might have a driver in the door and a driver in the dash, and you need to get the signals from both of those speaker outputs inside the amplifier to combine that for your front stage. Just a great example there. So on this side, on the input side, we combine channels 1 and 3 together, and the output of that channel 1 and 3 combination is applied to the odd channels on the output side of the amplifier. So channels 1 plus 3 gives you the same output on channel 1, 3, 5, and 7. Channels 2 and 4 on the input side are combined. So you're combining those 2 channels together to get the output for the even number channels, channels 2, 4, 6, and 8. Easy enough. If you look, this is actually the same as our 1-2 mode, okay? We've just expanded it to add 2 more channels of capability on the input side. Our one mode is pretty unique. This allows you to take one single channel of input and provide output to all four of the channels available on the amplifier. So this would apply to our 4ES and 5ES on the multi-channel side, and of course on our 1ES, the monoblock amplifier, of course. That one channel input gives you some flexibility when you're setting up a system. Might be a left and right situation for a 4ES or even 5ES. Might also be for if you're installing just a ton of speakers in a vehicle or trying to accommodate a ton of speakers in a vehicle. New Cadillacs, for instance, have numerous speakers around that car. You might take one channel of input, that front right section, if you will, and pipe that into your amplifier and then provide channels for 4 speakers on the output side. A lot of flexibility there. Kind of be creative with how you use that one. Probably not as often used as the other modes, but certainly one of the great tools in our toolbox here for you to get these amplifiers into vehicles. So here's a pretty unique mode that's only available on the 6ES and the 8ES. And this is essentially our 1-4, 1-6, 1-8 mode, but it's cut in half. This allows you to kind of separate the different channels for the input to separate your output on the amplifier side. So instead of 1 through 4 for your input to get that output on the outside, you're going channels 1 and 2, which provides that stereo output to channels 1 through 4. Again, odd numbers to odd numbers. So your channel 1 provides the output to channels 1 and 3. And then the even input provides your output to your channels 2 and 4. Okay. So even to even, odd to odd on the channel input to output. And then what we do is we jump down to channels 5 and 6 for the input side. And this allows you to split the amplifier kind of in half, if you will, in half on the 8ES, almost in half on the 6ES. But channels 5 and 6 allow you to put in a different set of values or input for those outputs. So channel 5 goes to 5, 6 to 6, and then, of course, it's mirrored on channels 7 and 8 for the 8ES. So in addition to our great input flexibility, we also have a really cool feature that allows some flexibility on the output side as well. Every one of our mobile ES amplifiers has a line output that's available for maybe hooking up amplifiers or other products downstream from that amplifier. Keep in mind, it's very important to note this, that the input setting that you have and the output setting that you have are completely independent from each other. So if you have the channel set to a 1 through 4 on the input side, you can set it to a different mode on the output side. Those two modes do not affect each other, and the output side is not affected by any filters, combinations, or anything that you have set on the amp. It's simply taking your inputs on the amp and sending them to the line outputs on the amplifier as well. Remember previously when we were talking about the input side, we were talking about the speaker output side. This is the input side coming to the line output side, basically the RCA outs on the amplifier. So on through mode, it's pretty simple. This is a one-to-one relationship on any of the amplifiers. The inputs on RCA inputs 1 and 2 on the amplifier go straight through, unaffected by anything, to channels 1 and 2 on the output side. Simple enough. This is a pretty basic kind of level throughput on any type of amplifier you'd see in the aftermarket. All mode gives you a kind of a new flexibility here. We're able to combine on our multi-channel amplifiers all of 4 of the inputs on channels 1 through 4. So you're combining all of those signal that's on those 4 inputs and providing that mono signal output on channels 1 and 2 of the output side. When you're hooking up multiple amplifiers, maybe in different zones on a boat or an RV or something like that, this might be handy to capture all of that signal that's coming in on those 4 different inputs and then provide that maybe to an outdoor amp or an amp in another room or something that has all of that signal available, and then kind of modulate based on what you need on the output side from there. Stereo mode gives you the same flexibility you had on the input side with that 1 + 3, 2 + 4. But again, it's independent of the input side. So you can have that set to a 1 + 3, 2 + 4 on the input and on the output, or you can have any arrangement of any of those inputs and outputs available. Stereo mode combines the inputs on channels 1 and 3 and provides them on the channel 1 of the line output side. And then the 2 + 4 combines the signals on channel inputs 2 and 4 and provides the output on channel 2 of the line output side. Very easy to get kind of the flexibility you need out of all of our Mobile ES amplifier outputs. So we've talked a lot about the inputs and the outputs of our Sony Mobile ES amplifiers, which is great. But I want to talk about one different kind of, variable here, and that includes our XM8ES amplifier. It's a feature that is different on that particular amplifier. I want to make sure you guys understand that fully. So you'll notice that on the XM8ES Mobile ES amplifier, we don't have the RCA lugs on the side of the amplifier. If we were to do that, it would have extended the length of that amplifier pretty long and probably made it uninstallable in most applications. So we wanted to keep the frame kind of compact. That 8ES is the same channel as our 6ES and our 5ES amplifiers. And we wanted to maintain that footprint across all of our amplifiers. But because of this, we had to install a harness to accommodate all of the inputs and outputs of this amplifier. So on the screen here, you'll see the RCA inputs based on that little harness there. But don't fret, this isn't like a short little porcupine harness that some competitors use that give you this array of RCAs right outside the amplifier. This is a 10-inch long harness that allows you to get the harness tucked behind the amplifier, maybe behind a trim panel, maybe poke the small end through a hole so you just see the plug coming out and have access to all the RCAs in a protected fashion behind a trim panel. On top of that, besides the harness that you've got to kind of manipulate there, there's another change or difference between the ADS and the rest of our lineup. So all of our other amplifiers will take one single channel of input for each pair of channels. So our 1ES through our 6ES will all take one single input for each pair. So the 1ES, of course, that covers both of the inputs on that one. Our 4ES for channels 1 and 2, we can apply just the signal from channel 1 to provide a great, sound across both channels. On the 8ES, it's different. So where that matters is if it gets down to a bridging scenario. So if you're to bridge the channels on a 4ES, for instance, you only have to apply signal to one of the two channels on each set of those. So apply it to channel 1 for channels 1 and 2, apply it to channel 3 for channels 3 and 4, and you can bridge those two sets of channels on a 4ES with no problem. On the 8ES, you have to apply signal to both channels in each set of bridged channels on the amplifier. So if you're bridging channels 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, you'll have to supply signal to all 4 of those channels from whatever source you have, whether it's a DSP, a radio, whatever it is. You've got to get that signal to both sets of channels to provide the proper bridging output that you expect from the amplifier. So thanks a lot for attending this workshop with me. It means a lot that you're supporting our Sony products. We want to make sure that you've got all the flexibility and technical information you need to get these products installed into a vehicle. If you need more information, please reach out to our Sony technical support help group. And then you can also reach out to your distributor rep as well for more information.